All right, moving on. So that was the interface, right? We covered, the tools in the menus, commands. I'll talk about repeat command, cascading, navigation. Let's go to navigation. All right, navigation in terms of the model right here, right? So we do what's called rotating, right? With this right here, right? With the right button, and we move around, right? Notice that that's not the case if I go to top or front view, right? So you basically have two clicks, right? Right click and left click, right? And both of them do different things on the screen, right? So if I go into perspective, it rotates. If I go into what's called an orthographic view, right, top, front, or right, I do what's called pan, right? P-A-N. You're panning, right? Or you can grab the little hand right here, right? This guy right there, right? And you can pan. But like I said, you really want to get fast at this modeling thing. And notice that if I use the left click, I do what's called selections, right? I'm drawing selections. So I select that, I select this, I select this, I select that. And notice that when you do a selection, it turns yellow, right? It actually gives you the yellow color right here, meaning that it's selected. Additionally, I can zoom in and out with my wheel, right? Scrolling with my with my wheel. So zoom in, zoom out, zoom in, zoom out, right? And right, no one has asked, but doing the right click on the perspective, it rotates, right? It doesn't do the panning. If I want to pan, and by pan I mean kind of like move my screen, I need to hold shift and do a right click, right? And that's how I'm doing what's called a panning in the perspective view, okay? So that's simple, that's the basic navigation there. There's what's called the modeling aids right here that I've talked about, right? These tools on the bottom, right? Notice that it says right there, and, near, point, mid, center, intersection, perpendicular, tangent. I'll talk about that. And right now I have my grid snap on, which is something that we're going to be using. We have what's called display modes, right? So display modes are, I'm going to double click on perspective so that I maximize the screen, and I'm going to zoom in right here to some of the objects that I have here, right? And again, notice that I'm going through this, kind of fast, but right now we're going to apply everything. Right now I'm just kind of covering all of the concepts, right? So, just bear with me, and again, take some notes. Display modes, right? Display modes live right here. So notice that right next to the title of the viewport, in this case perspective, there's a little arrow right there. That means that there's a menu there. If we click there, right, notice that the first things that we see right here are what's called your display modes. I have these two extras that are just, how do you call them? Custom, right, that I was playing with. Don't worry about if you don't see those two. But if we start clicking through that, notice that our display changes, right? So take a look at the geometry that you see on my screen. And the first one I select is wireframe. Now, wireframe allows us to see objects right, as wireframe, right? So we can see through them, but we also see the main curves or the main lines that make up the geometry, right? So it's just like as if this geometry was being made out of wires, hence the name wireframe. If we keep going down the list, right, we see our most standard one, which is the shaded one. Shaded allows us now to see the objects with volume. Notice even that in this sphere, we start seeing that kind of glare that allows us to see or to tell that it's a three-dimensional object, right? So now we see the surfaces of the objects on the shaded view. We keep going, we have this rendered view. Now notice that things change, right? They look a little bit more realistic, if you will, right? That's because they're being displayed as a render, right? They're not a full-on rendering, but they are rendered, right? Meaning that the lines disappear for the most part, right? Those are, a different kind of line, so don't worry about those, right? But we now see the objects. I like to think about it. I like to think about it as clay, right? This is clay kind of looking, but it's a very helpful view, right? This rendered view, and we keep going through this, right? Now we have our ghosted view, right? Ghosted, it's kind of like a combination of wireframe and shaded, right? So we see the wireframe, which is the lines that make up the geometry, but we also see the surface of the geometry. Now that surface, though, it's kind of translucent, right? So it allows us to see past through it. So it's really good when you're building stuff and you kind of need to see what's going on in the back, but you also need some sort of a context. So that view, it's actually a really cool one, right? The ghosted view. We have the X-ray, which it becomes a little bit flatter, right? This one I really don't use, but you can see how it's different, the X-ray from the ghosted, right? We have the technical view, right, where we only see the lines and hidden lines, right, which are the little dash lines right there, and our solid lines right there. So different from the wireframe, right? This is our technical, and this is our wireframe. And then we get to some of these kind of stylized display modes. You have the artistic one. Hey, right, there you go. So it's the artistic view right here. I don't think I have ever used these views right here. They're really not necessary for what we'll start doing. Later on, you can customize it, and this is kind of like what I was doing over here with these ones. You have this pen style right here. You have this Arctic, ray traced. I do not recommend using this ray trace for right now. And then you can create your own standard kind of views, such as the ones that I was kind of playing with, right, in order to create a different view style, right? And those, again, my friends, are the display modes, right? Display modes. Wireframe, shaded, render, ghosted, and beyond, right? Let's see, question or comment. Miss Lecky, right? You're right. My Mac is definitely different. I have to watch YouTube. Yes. So again, what's important is that you understand the concepts. The names, again, for the most part, they remain the same, right? I mean, display mode is the same. Display mode or layers is the same. It's just about where things are, all right? So again, for my Mac users, perhaps what you're gonna have to do is go into right here. It says Rhino for Mac tutorials. And let's see, if we click there, there we go, right? There's a video, 4 minutes long, that will give you probably what I'm talking about right here on Mac, right? So I would kind of look at that, and I think once you understand the differences between the interfaces, later on when I go through more specific details, you'll know how to navigate around it, and it won't become that much of an issue, Ms. Lecky. But anyway, I just wanted to point out that there's resources for both, right? Rhino for Windows and Rhino for Mac, and they're both there. That being said, there is, if you ultimately don't want to deal with the Mac interface, but you can buy a new laptop, there's also the parallels option that it's kind of wonky sometimes, and it's not the best, right? But there's that parallels for Mac, right? And it allows you to run, or Bootcamp, right? I mean, allows you to run Windows on Mac. It's an option. All right, guys, cool. What else? Why don't you recommend ray trace? Just curious. Yeah, good question. The reason that I do not recommend it right now is because well, it's kind of difficult to point it out right now, but what the ray trace is doing a rendering in the display mode. So I don't know if you can see right here. It's going to be really hard for you to see on your screen, but right here is giving me a clock. And it actually moving, right? So it says 18, 19, 20. So right now what it actually is doing is creating a live rendering, right? So if I rotate my view, right, notice that it's gonna start again, right? So if I rotate right now, notice that it's kind of calculated again. So it's creating another rendering. And I guess it's not necessary. We're gonna go about rendering differently. I mean, let's say don't use it. I'm just saying don't worry about it right now, I guess. But play with it, see what it does. You'll see that really is just creating a rendering. It's not gonna be that evident right now because there's no materials. And it's working kind of fast, but once you start adding materials and lighting and all of these things, it becomes really heavy, and it's just going to slow down your computer, that ray trace mode, because it's live, right? I mean, it's generating a new image every second, versus this one's right here. But play with it. Great, Miss Lecky, I found them. Good, yes, check it out. And Mr. Santos, you're welcome. All right, good. So those were our what? Display modes, right? Display modes right here. And generating images for Rhino. I think we could do that with the exercise though. Let's first draw something, and and then we can create images. So I'm gonna take you guys through how to start your first file. All right. So you're gonna do the first thing, or you're gonna do what I'm doing. The first thing is gonna be to open it, open Rhino, right? So we open Rhino. All right, there it is. I'm gonna move this over here. So when you open Rhino for the first time, you should get something kind of like this. Okay. Okay. The first thing that we need to do, guys, is check our units. Okay, that's one of the first things that we need to do. Okay, when you are creating a new file, and I'm actually covering this right here, right? So Rhino Lab 1, object types, right? File setup, units, and grid. Right, that's the first thing that we're going to be covering. All right, so here we are, right? We have opened a new Rhino file. And you'll see one of the main errors that I see students getting into is not setting up their units correctly. And then later on, it becomes an issue because, everything's out of proportion. right? The first thing that we want to do is kind of type units, enter, right? So this panel comes up right here, right? And notice that we have right now millimeters, right? And we don't want to do that, all right? So let's change that, right? Let's leave that to, let's see, what do I have this other model in feet? All right, so let's change it to feet, all right, feet. Absolute tolerance and angle tolerance, let's leave it like that. Now, distance display right here, let's set it up to feet and inches. Okay, so feet and inches. Display precision, 1/8 is fine, but you can change that, right, into higher precision or lower precision. So 1/8 is fine, the default, and let's click OK. Now, you want to do this the first thing, right, before you draw anything. You can always change the units, even if you have objects on your model space, except that, again, scaling becomes a problem, things become or get out of proportion. So, and it's probably going to happen to you, right? Just remember, right, like, oh, units, right? And, you know, come to me and I'll help you kind of like resizing everything. But if you can avoid it, that would just be great for everyone. So we have done units, right? Right. Whoops, I need to select my screen, right? Units. So again, it's just typing and enter. Now, enter, right? When you're trying to tell the computer, it's like go, right? So I want to work with the units. You type units, and then you want to enter. There's 3 ways that you can do this, right? You can do enter or the return key, it's the same key, spacebar, or a right click. All of those 3 actions count as an enter, right? So spacebar brings me to units right there. Okay? And this is both Windows and Mac. Escape and all of that. The next one is going to be options, right? Options. Which brings us to the same window right there. But what we're trying to look for in this case, rather than the units, is our grid right here. You see where it says grid up here? All right, let's click on that. And copy the settings that I have on this other screen. Let me see. So we want to change this number right here to 200. I'm going to use the tab key to go to the next cell. So I type 0.5, and then major lines every 10. Right? Notice that should change your grid out here. Right? Watch my left side of the screen right here. Watch that right there for a second. Okay? And I'm going to type right here 2. Right? You see how that changed, right? And I'm going to type 0.5, and the grid becomes denser. We're going to start with the grid because it's a great reference. And then the snap spacing, this snap spacing down here, let's change that to 0.5. All right. So you're going to be starting your first lap, right? This is what we're setting up right now. And one of the main things that you definitely want to make sure that you get right is this right here, because if not, your software or your modeling area is going to be weird or different. So 200.5, 10.5, but make sure that they are feet. Remember, that's why we changed the units. Right? So again, go back to units down here, right? And make sure that we're on feet, and that's it. So we have changed the units and we have changed the grid. Cool. Yes, so like I said, guys, right, Mr. Bedoya, on Mac, I'm not able to find the grid. Exactly. That's exactly what I'm talking about. And it's going to be a matter of, you know, I don't know, YouTube, Google. That's full disclosure, guys, full disclosure, right? This is not a Mac class, and unfortunately, it's not designed that way. Ideally, we will be working at school, and at school you have the lab, the lab, and all the computers have the software. But again, that's why I brought this since the first day of classes, right? If you have a Mac, it's gonna be extra work. Okay, I'm here to help you, right? You know, I work on a Mac, and I have some experience on a Mac, but I cannot guarantee that everything's gonna be a smooth ride. Okay, I just need everyone to understand that. All right, Mr. Bedoya. Do follow along, please. Do follow along. And again, the important thing is that you understand the concept so that you can apply it, and we'll find answers. All right. So I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry. I really don't like that. It's only going to help someone, but it's just unfortunately it's part of this situation. Okay. So we have set up our grid and our units. So we hit OK. I make sure that we hit OK, and we're ready to begin our drawing, right? So basically, what we're trying to do is mimic what I have right here. All right. The first thing that we're gonna do is create some layers right here. All right. So we're gonna create some layers right here. Okay. So we have our default one, which is going to be fine, right? So let's create this right here. Let's create one that's called point. I like to abbreviate, right? Right. Point. Right. Curves. Surface. Right. Solids, and let's call this guidelines right there. All right, so we create layers by clicking on this let me see, let me place my cursor, new layer button right there. Okay. So, and give it a different color. Right, so select your points, right? Maybe for my points, I do something like red. For my curves, I'll do, for my curves, I'll do something like, I don't know, I'll do something like a teal or a blue. My surfaces, maybe pink, purple. Solids, maybe I'll do some green, right? And guidelines, I'll do my guidelines green, and I'll do my solids, kind of like a soft pink right there, kind of like that. And I'll leave the default like they are. Let's start with those layers right there, and we'll see what else we can start doing. All right. Now, notice that when I go into my layers right here, there's a few settings that we can change right here. So the name, right? There's a sort of an invisible column right here that you cannot see, right? But it's where that check mark should go, right? So that's the if it's active or not. Then you have this light bulb that is showing you that it's on or off, and then you have this lock to lock the layer, and then you have the color to change the layer color. Then you have other ones right here. We're not going to worry about those right now. All right, those properties. But go ahead and change the color. All right, for those. And again, you can pick anywhere in the spectrum right here, the color wheel, and you can pick anyone in the hue right here within a particular color. Right? So that you have that right there. And it's important to note or to point out that whenever you start drawing something, you're going to draw with the layer that has this check mark right here. So right now, I would be drawing with the default layer. right? So I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change it to the guidelines so that it's active, right? And the first thing that we are going to do, right, is draw a rectangle. You guys ready for your first command? Right? So we're gonna type right rec, and notice that as soon as I type REC, right, rectangle appears, and I can press Enter, spacebar, or do a right click. Right? Now notice that the command changes. Right, first corner of a rectangle. As you do that, before that though, guys, do me a favor. Let's make sure that this setting is on. Grid snap. Right? Grid snap, and it should be thickened, right? So that's normal, and that's thickened. That means that it's on. Make sure the grid snap is on so that we can actually snap to the grid. What do I mean by snapping to the grid? Well, you're only going to be able to draw or to, it's called snap, right? Snap to a grid point, right? So I click there, and notice that I'm using the grid. I'm going to draw sort of a 4x4 kind of rectangle right here, right? So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to type copy, right? Copy, right? Select objects to copy, right? I'm going to select this object right here, right? And notice that in the selection, I just go, right, select it like this, right? And then enter, right? Point to copy from, I'm going to copy from this corner right here. And I'm going to paste it. Let's say there, right there. And enter, escape, right? I'm done with the command. All right. So again, I don't expect you to follow along right now. I actually would rather you to take your time to see this and pause it, so that you can actually take your time learning this. All right. So let's try that one more time. Okay. Let's try that one more time. So again, let's make sure that grid snap is on. Right. And for right now, make sure that your settings right here are the same as mine down here. So end is on, point is on, mid is on, center, intersection, perpendicular, and quadrant, even though we don't need it. And by on, I mean there's a little check mark. Check mark like that inside of the box. Okay, and let's try this one more time, right? So rather than drawing another box, I can just type copy, right? So copy, enter, select that little box, enter, right? Select where I want to copy from, right? I don't need to enter, and then I select where I want to copy it to, right? Notice that the command is going to remain open until I either press enter, spacebar, or right click, and I exit out of the command, right? So I create 3 boxes, and let's do maybe 6. So I'm going to type copy one more time, enter. Now notice that from the right corner right here, I'm going to create a selection. I'm going to move over here, right? And I'll press enter. I'm going to select that point right there, and I'm going to copy it there. Right click, done. Maximize this. It's kind of hard for you guys to see, no? I'm realizing it's really hard for you guys to see that green. ¿Por qué no speak, guys? Is that better? Nope, that's not better at all. Let's do maybe red. There you go. That looks better. And then we can change the points to maybe green. Let's see if that works better. All right. I'm looking at how you guys are seeing this on your screen, and I think that works a little better. Since we're using the grid, the lines are overlapping with the grid, so it could be a little bit difficult to see. But if at any point you want to see what's going on without the grid, right, you can turn off the grid by, right, if you type grid, well, it should be F7, F7. If you press function 7, you turn on and off the grid. All right. That looks better, Matthew? All right, good. Thank you, guys. And there's a question, or was that a question, Martin Grau? Or just kind of? No. Okay. All right. Sorry about that, guys. Let me know. Let me know if it's not legible, or if you cannot hear me, or any issues. Let me know. Okay. No worries, Martin. Let me know. All right. So we have this area right here. Okay. So I'm going to double click to the top view. I'm going to double click on the perspective. Now I'm zooming in and out, right? And I have that. I have a grid plane with 6 outlines, or what will become outlines, or 6 spaces right here. I'm going to double click, and I'm going to go back to my top view, right? And I realized that we're missing one layer, and it's called text. Right, so I'm going to create another layer, and we're going to call this text. And I'm going to make it active, right? And I'm going to select another color. Now, when it comes to selecting colors on Rhino, I suggest that you do not pick the yellow color, right? The yellow color is for selections, right? The yellow color are selections, and you really don't want to use yellow color. You're probably not gonna know exactly what I'm talking about until you really need to use it, right? So I really wouldn't select yellow as a color. So let me see, something that you guys won't have an issue seeing. Well, actually, what if I just select something like gray, or maybe the red, maybe another red. Let's do something like that, all right? And I type, let's type text, right? T-E-X-T, text. And this window pops up. Okay. So we're going to type right here. I'm going to have my caps on, so I can type points. Okay. So I'm going to click OK. Notice that there's an object that appears on my screen. I'm going to snap to that grid point right there, and I'm going to click right there. Points. Now check this out, right? Check this out, guys. If I can borrow your attention, right? I'm going to type copy, enter, or spacebar. I'm going to select the text that I just created, spacebar, right? I'm going to select this corner right here, the one from the box that I just drew, right? Select it, and I'm going to use this other corner to paste it. And what I have just done right there, it's called a copy with a reference, right? And I'm going to go around on each box, and I'm going to paste that right there. Boom, 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 right? And enter, and I'm done, right? Enter and done. So let's go ahead and try that. All right. And then once you have that, right, double click on the text, and then you can re-edit that text box. can you go by text again, please? Window did not pop up. All right, so we type text, enter. So make sure that is that. Notice that if I type text, there's a few text objects right here. All right, we want the one that is just text, not text object, text properties, texture, select text, just text. All right, so select text, and this comes up, and you do this. All right, and we're gonna name this, right? So these are curves. Right now, if I press enter, right, it returns. It goes to the next line right there. But if I hold Control Enter, it actually enters the text and the window goes away. Right, and we have curves, and then we have surfaces. What else do we have? Solids. Surfaces. And we're gonna leave this. I'm not really sure what we're gonna do with this one, but just to keep it even, we're just gonna type for right now. I don't know. We'll come back to it. We'll use it for something. Okay. Jose, did that work, Mr. Santos? Let me know. Yes. Okay, great. Good job. All right, guys. So moving along. Now we're gonna go into each of these layers right here, and we're gonna draw or attempt to draw each of these little components that we have right here. And let me guide you through it so that we're using this exercise so that we see all the number of things that we can do right here, at least in its introduction version, right? So, and by that, I mean these tools right here, right? So we're gonna start with points, then we're gonna do curves, which is all of this, and then we're gonna do some surfaces, and then some solids. Okay, let me take you through that. So again, please watch, take notes, and again, you know, I would try to follow this at your own pace. So the first thing is I'm going to set up or set my points layer on. All right. So we do that. And then I'm going to go to the point tool right here. Notice that if I place my cursor on any of these icons right here, what happens? Well, what happens is a few things. The first thing is that it gives me a preview of the action within that tool, right? So if I place my cursor on top of that little arrow, it says cancel or cancel all. If I place my cursor on top of this one, it says single point or multiple points. And then it says control point, curve point. Now, aside from that, right, we also see that if I place my cursor on top of any tool without, you know, selecting it, it also tells me that the same button has two actions. And each of those actions can be turned on either with the left button, which is the top option, which is the control point through curves, or the right button, which is the curve through points. So that's really neat that you can actually have two tools in one button and more, as we're going to be seeing, right? I mean, some of these ones actually have more tools. But I'll take you through that, okay? So again, we're going to start with our first object type, which is points, okay? Make sure that the points layer is active, meaning that there's this check mark on, right? And we're going to use the first tool right there, which is a single point. So notice that that's the left mouse, and you know the drawings that you see there is actually meant to be a little mouse, right? So you have two options, and I'm going to draw it here a little bit larger, right? So it looks something like that, and it looks something like this, right? So the top one, it has this kind of button thicken, and then the other one has this one thicken like this, right? That's kind of like a blow up of what happens if I kind of place my cursor right there. So let's do the left button, meaning that we just draw one point and pick a point on the grid and wait, was that the right tool? That's this one right here. And drop a point. And notice that that's that. That's a short command, right? I mean, you do left click, location of point object. I'm looking at my command line right here. I select the location. That's it. Command done, right? That's one of those short commands. Let's do the point tool with the right tool, right? Which should be multiple points. Let's see how that behaves differently, right? So if I do a right click on the same tool, right, and I'm moving around, right, I can do, if I do a right click, I can pan, but if I do a left click, notice that it's the same action, except that after dropping the first point, it's still active, right? The tool is still on, and it's going to allow me to drop points until what? Well, if I read right here, until I press enter, all right? So draw points, enter. Let's see, is that, so again, if I change this color right here, it's a little bit better. You guys can see that better. All right, and you've done your first Rhino drawing, right? You've done a couple of points. All right. And later on, we'll see how points, you know, I mean, they're actually critical for Rhino in terms of actually editing geometry and modifying geometry. But for Rhino, just something simple. All right. Now curves, right? Curves. Like I said, in Rhino terminology, this is the kind of file that I had set up right here. In Rhino terminology, it doesn't matter if it's a linear line or a curvilinear line. They're all considered curves, right? Circle is a curve and a hexagon is a curve in Rhino language, right? So those are these tools right here. Notice that, you know, we have our point, but then we have these ones that are just kind of black and white. And then all of a sudden, the blue starts some yellow, right? That means that these tools right here, those are just curves or curve tools. And once we start seeing some sort of a shading on them, which is this blue, that means that we're dealing now with either surfaces or polysurfaces, aka solids. Don't worry about it too much right now, okay? Don't worry about it too much right now. Don't get yourself stuck in the mud, as some people say. Don't get stuck right now in the nuances, or you know, that's not the big picture, okay? So let's go ahead and change our layer, right? I'm gonna go now into my curves layer. All right, to my curves layer right there. And I'm going to draw some curves. All right. So I'm going to go right here into the lines tool, right? And I can place my cursor, right? And I can see a polyline, control point curve, single circle center radius, an ellipse, an arc, rectangle, polygon, fillet. Right. Let's start our first curve by typing line. Right? Line, something as simple as that. So we type line, we select it. Notice that it's asking for a start of line. Start of line. Remember, the software is saying, hey, human, what's the start of this line that you want? And then you'll be like, oh, thank you, software. I want the line to start right there. Now notice that my command is active. And the software is waiting for me to specify what? The end of the line, right? So now I'm going to pick any point right there and create a line. All right. there it is. And then again, let me change this a little bit so you guys can see this better. Somewhat better, right? So that was my first line, right? Now notice that there's another command that is called lines, plural, not a single line, but lines. I can do multiple lines, right? So I'm going to select it, right? And I can start using the grid, right, to creating some lines, right? I'm going to leave it open. Right? I'm done doing lines. I'm going to right click. Okay. Now, what's the difference between line and lines? Well, I think it's evidently clear, right? A line is just a line. A lines, when you use plural lines, you draw multiple lines. However, they are individual lines. Notice that they are graphically connected, meaning that we are reading this as, you know, a single line that is kind of like going all around this perimeter right here, but they are not actually welded together, if you will, right? It's called joined. They're not joined in Rhino yet, all right? But maybe we don't want them joined, and that's why we're using the command lines. But if you wanted to create that same shape and you wanted it all to be a continuous line, meaning that it's a joined line, we type a different command. And this command is called a polyline. And this commands should be the same both for Mac and Windows, right? This is what I mean, that the commands themselves, you know, that's the important part right here, that you understand or you capture the command so that then we can, you know, elaborate on the command itself if the interface is different. So we type polyline and we click enter. Now I can draw, you know, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get the same form. Let's see, something like that, and we go 3, 2, 2, that. All right, right? And notice that it's still active. I'm going to do a right click. Now, these two objects look graphically the same. However, they are definitely different. To begin with, this object is a single object. Right? Notice that I click on it, right? So I select it and I click on it, it becomes yellow, right? Notice that all of these points appear, and maybe this thing right here that I'll talk about later on is called the gumball, right? But I select that and it's all active, right? Versus here, if I click on the same location, only that top portion becomes active. Again, line, lines, polyline. Let's use our polyline again, right, to create another shape or form using our grid, right? And you'll see, right, that either I can press enter, or if I go back to where I started, which is called the origin, and I click there, the command automatically exits or it's done, right? It could be something as simple as a triangle or something a little bit more elaborate like this polygon over here, right? But at the end of the day, right, this is curves. These are all curves, all right? And we can actually see that by this properties tab over here on the bottom, right? If you keep an eye out over here, right, you notice that anytime that I select an object, it's going to give me a description, and it's called the type. Right? So I select that line, it says it's an open curve. Select that, it's an open curve, open curve. This one changes, right? It says now closed curve. This is now a closed curve, and this is a text object. All right, and obviously the property changes, and we know that's a text object. Okay. Good so far? Any questions in terms of these lines? Let me know. Okay, we're gonna move on, right? Move forward. Let's see. So those are rectilinear lines. Let's now move into some curvilinear curves, if that even makes sense, right? Curvilinear curves. So that would be this tool right here, control point curve and curve through points. This one right there, right? So I can click there, and I can start selecting. All right, start doing that. I'm gonna right click and exit. All right. So that was the control point curve. That was the left click. I'm gonna do the right click, which is curve through points. And we see that we need points to build that, right? Select points to build that curve. We know how to make points, right? So let's try that. So I'm gonna escape to get out of that command. I'm gonna go to my points layer. I'm going to select multiple points with my right click. Let's see how this works, guys. I'm gonna do a series of points right there. Right click to enter. I'm gonna go back to my curves layer, and then I'm gonna do a right click right here where it says curve through points. Do right click. Now we have select points to build curve through. All right, I'm gonna do a selection right here. Right, select points to build curve through. Press enter when done. I'm done. So I press enter, and it does just that. Notice that the command is still active, guys. I'm gonna press enter one more time, and we are done. And this is nice because we can now start seeing how points can help us build curves, and then later on the curves will help us build surfaces, and ultimately the surfaces will become our solids and poly surfaces. Ms. Cabrera, right? Properties panel show up. Which one are panel? Are we talking about? Oh, this one right here, right? This one right here. It should be there. Probably is not there for you. Let's see. How do we bring this up? Is it right here? Toolbar, properties. There we go. No, how do we bring this up? I think it's actually over here. There we go. Okay. Here, Natalia, I'll show you. So I think if you have it on by default, perhaps, there it came. If you have it by default, maybe you have it like this, right? Maybe you don't see the properties. You see the tabs over here? Right click on any of the tabs. This right here is telling you which ones you have on, right? You have the help on, layers is on, libraries. Properties is not, so let's click on properties, and then it brings it like that, right? So that's fine, right? I mean, properties is there, and layers is over here. Layers is this one right here with the little cake. Well, I call it a cake, or it could be the layers of the earth or whatever, right? But I actually rather do the following, guys. I rather move it, float it out here, and then bring it right there. I like to have them like this, right? So I can move this right here. So on the top, I have my layers, and on the bottom, I have my properties. Should I? Let me do that one more time. Okay, I'm gonna get rid of the properties because I think that's how by default you guys will see it. So I have no properties right now. First of all, I need to turn on the properties tab on, right? Bring it on. Then I can float it out, right? I can bring it somewhere over here. I go back to my layers right here. That's fine. That's how we have it. But now I can grab this from its ribbon right here on the top. And then notice that as you're dragging it and you're placing it on top, right, you can position it at different locations, right? You can place it right here as an additional column to the left, an additional column to the right. You can send it right here to those tabs, which is originally how it came out. Or I can place it right here on the bottom, right? And I can place my cursor right here and right, move this right here, align it. And it's helpful to have the properties tab on. it's always nice to see properties, understand like, oh, that's open, that's closed, and later on, we'll see other different things with it. You're welcome, Natalia. Great question. Good question. Any other question, guys? Let me know. Okay. Let's create more curves. All right. Let's create more curves. So we've done control point curve, curve through points. All right. So we learned that the first one, you don't need points and you can just create a curve. The second one, you need points first and you create a curve through those points. What's the next curve? Circle. Circle. All right. So we click right here. Center of circle. Notice that it's asking me, where's the center of the circle? Well, I want the center of the circle there. And notice that I can do a circle like that. Now, what if I wanted to do another circle? Well, duh, Munoz, right? I mean, you just go to the tool right here and then select the tool again and then draw another circle. Yeah, but there's another way, right? If you draw a circle and then you press either enter, spacebar, or your right mouse button, you repeat the last performed action. I'll repeat that again. If you press enter, enter, spacebar, or right click without any command active, you will repeat the previously performed action. In this case, if I press spacebar, notice that the circle command immediately came up because it was the last command that I performed. And I can draw another circle. There. And I right click again and I can draw another circle. I right click again and you get the point, right? So that is the circle, right? We have then now the ellipse, which I rarely ever use, but it's there, right? So specifying the ellipse center, right? So let's say that that's my center. It's asking me for the end of the first axis. So let's say that this is the end of the first axis. And then it's asking me for the second axis. Right? It could be something like that. And it does the huevo, right? The egg. Right? It's kind of like, does something like that. Let's move on. We have the rectangle, right? We have the rectangle right here, which we used, first. I can draw a rectangle right there. I can do a right click and do another rectangle. Just do a little rectangle like that. We have the arc, right? We have an arc. Now notice that it's telling me to specify the center of the arc. I'm going to move somewhere over here, right? So if that's the center of the arc, and then I was telling me specify the start of the arc, let's say that this is the start of the arc, and then I was asking me the endpoint or angle, right? So I can specify a point, kind of like Miss Pac-Man, or I can specify an angle, right? So I can start typing right here, 279, right? And that would be a circle or an arc with, with the angle of 279 degrees. So, but I can just do it graphically, right? So I can just add it like that. So again, another center and another arc right there, center point. I'll do that right there. That would be the arcs. And then polygon, right? Polygon, right? Select that guy right there. Center of inscribed polygon, right? I pick the center, and then it's asking me for the corner of the polygon. which would be maybe that right there. Draw that right there. Right. Now, what if I wanted to draw a polygon that has either more or less sides? Right now, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided polygon, making it what we know as a hexagon. Right? What if I wanted to make a pentagon? Right? What if I wanted to make a pentagon? Well, it's the same tool, right? It's the same tool, right? We go to Polygon, but then we're actually going into the toolbar right here, into the prompt line, and we're actually going to specify the number of the sides. Okay, check this out. All right, watch my screen. So I'm going to turn on the Polygon tool. Notice that right here there's a parenthesis, right, with some settings, right? These are all different settings for that command. But notice that the first one says num sides equal 6. That's what's giving us the hexagon, right? But if I click on it, right, notice that the command line changed, and I can actually change the number 6 to a 5, and then press enter, and then it brings me back to the origin of the command, let's put it that way, where it's asking me again for a center. I pick a center. Now I pick another corner, and now I have a pentagon. Right? So try it again. I can type polygon. Right? Use my arrows, select polygon. Let's do now a triangle, right? Number of sides, 3. Enter. Click. All right. And I think those would be our curves. I mean, of course, there's always more, right? But you know, I mean, as an introduction. Okay. All right, guys. Cool. We've reached the next hour right here. Let me go ahead and stop this recording so that again we can break them down a little bit. Let's just stop recording.